All righty. Welcome to the Can I Borrow Your Car podcast. This series that we're doing today is all about identifying safe drivers as a business owner or a financial advisor serving business owners in the exit planning or growth consulting part of the business. And today we've got an international guest, our first official, actually two potentially international guests. I picked up a little bit of an accent from both people. I fished with one of them. The other one turned us down, but that's a different story. Like something about having to work or family, maybe even a funeral, but it didn't matter. They chose not to fish. But I want to introduce Graham's a longtime friend of mine. We met on LinkedIn, as I recall, Graham, primarily because we both have special needs sons and we were in business. And he is got a little choked up. He is a dear friend. He's a dear friend. There's not a lot of us that talk about what it's like to go through what we go through, especially online. And so Graham has actually come and been in the States. I trust him implicitly. And then Kyle's somebody that Graham says I should trust, but we haven't been fishing, so I'm not sure. But all things aside, Graham, would you introduce yourself and then kick it to Kyle?
Fantastic, Mike. Listen, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Talking about safe driving and all of that, maybe I'll kick off by saying I was a former racing driver. So I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing.
and your brother is a professional racer.
Yeah, well, my brother is a professional race driver. And the thing about race drivers is you drive like, can I say it, a bat out of hell on the racetrack. When it comes to the road, you probably drive like Miss Daisy, but jokes aside, yeah, so my background is, you'll pick up by the accent, I live in Cape Town, South Africa, but we founded bizval about 3 and a bit years ago to really help entrepreneurs understand and unlock the value in their business, and speak to them in a way which they can understand without any jargon, without any making the business owner feel stupid. And I think most importantly, and I think we'll touch on that later today, is we recognize that technology's got a role to play in helping us do our jobs better. But ultimately, when you're talking about businesses, it's an emotional thing. It's about people-to-people connection. We're not doing business valuations. We're in the business of trust. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, I'm really excited to be here today, Mike. We won't make any fishing jokes. I can't even say that I caught a smaller fish than you because I didn't catch any fish when we went fishing in Virginia. But maybe I was just practicing for next time. But
That's right.
Yeah, wonderful to be here today. And I'll let Kyle introduce himself. Kyle is our VP based in Austin, Texas. But over to you, Kyle.
Yeah, no, thanks for being here. And yeah, actually quite upset that I didn't go fishing. It's a big hobby of mine, fish kind of all over the world. But as you can hear from my accent, I'm also from South Africa, a little further up the coast, actually, just below Mozambique in a city called Durban. I moved over to the States in 2012. I moved over to New York, chased capital markets there for about 10 years, and then ended up moving over to the West. When I moved over to the West Coast, I worked for a small business and got a real look behind the curtain of how a lot of small businesses operate. A lot of them can be very glossy on the outside, but lack the internal controls that help them to sell. When I was actually on my way over to Texas, I had a friend of mine reach out and say, hey, you should chat to these guys at bizval. And as luck would have it, my former experience kind of lined up perfectly and placed me, with just the right kind of experience to really kick the effort off here in the US. So I've been with the company since January, and yeah, based out of Austin, Texas.
Awesome. Well, so let me set the stage. So what I've noticed, I've been a SEPA going on 3 years now, very, very proud and honored to be in that community at the level I am. And I spend most of my time, as Graham knows and Kyle learned in the pre-show, I spend most of my time working with high-level financial advisory firms that have both business owner clients and actively want to grow the exit value of their current clients while attracting more. Valuations, obviously, are an incredibly important part of, first of all, getting a range of value for a business owner and or a financial advisor working with that business owner. I always say if you're doing a financial plan as a financial advisor on a business owner, and you don't have an evaluation on that business, what the hell are you doing, right? And most of those valuations I will be diplomatic because this is being recorded now, but most of these valuations I find to be suspect for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's generally only a machine generated valuation, right? And or it's incredibly expensive because it's done by a certified valuation expert here in the States. You're looking at anywhere low end 10, 12,000 to potentially $25,000, $30,000. The reason I know this is my CPA is one of those certified valuation experts. You know, hard test, they charge a lot of money for it. And so you have this huge, it's like the Wild Wild West. You know, you're in Austin, Texas, right? It's like shootouts at the OK Corral. And one of the challenges is, number one, how do business owners and how these financial advisors, how do they know when they're working with other consultants, or let alone working directly with a software company or a valuation expert? How can they make sure that they're making good decisions about these numbers? How can they start doing it? So I wanted to kick to you guys. You're in the space. You're competing on an international level with a variety of companies. There you go. So wasn't that nice? A wide variety, with, shall we see, varying degrees of accuracy. I know I don't want to get too deep into the bizval story. By the way, it's spectacular. Like, I was around when Graham was ideating this kind of thing and doing it, and it's been really great to see it grow. I don't know if he's making money yet, but you know, at least he looks like he sleeps a little bit. But when you guys look at this thing, how do you talk to prospective clients and help these business owners? Because you talk a lot to business owners. How do you help the business owners get to clarity about what you guys do and then how it fits into what's available in the marketplace?
So, Mike, I mean, maybe I can tackle that from a couple of angles. And the first one, I guess, when we started our business, I mean, our vision was always to help and empower entrepreneurs to better understand value. My other co-founder, Howard, who's got a few more gray hairs than me. So Howard's early 60s. He over the course of his career has built over 30 businesses, and they're either still running or he's exited all of them. And that was almost the sort of the catalyst for why we started bizval, is because he had been to one of these big audit firms and paid close on $30,000, $40,000 for a valuation. When he wanted to exit his biggest business. And what he got back, with all due respect, was the valuation was probably right, but it was 49 pages of disclaimers as to why this firm could not be held responsible. So it was a compliance-based valuation that was ticking the boxes for a deal process that needed to happen. And the other thing is, he was kind of made to feel a little bit stupid in the whole process. You know, I mean, he's a gritty business person who's built businesses. And this professional firm made him feel like he was inadequate. And I say that in the nicest possible way. And it was no slight on them. It's just the way that they do business. You know, valuations are hard. They're complicated. They're all these things. The reality is they're not. And unfortunately, depending on where in the industry you look at these things, you know, whether you're a business broker or you're an advisor or whatever, there's almost a misaligned incentive here to make these things seem more complicated than they are, so that you can charge a lot of money to do that. And that's fine, that's business. But at the end of the day, valuations are actually super, super simple. If you go back to first principles, don't tell people. You can't say. If you go back to first principles, it's about how much cash is this business generating, and how consistently and repeatedly can it continue to generate that cash into the future.
That's all I care about. As a buyer, that's all I care about. That's it.
Absolutely. So that's the first principle. And the second principle, you touch on that, is your business is only worth what somebody else is prepared to pay. Okay, so you've got to look at it through the lens. You know, everybody's mother thinks that their child is the smartest, most good-looking, you know, going to change the world, whatever, you know. But the reality is, would somebody else adopt your child? You know, and I say that in the nicest possible way. But, you know, at the end of the day, you've got to look and say, objectively, what would a buyer look at this lens through? I think also, unfortunately, there's a lot of mistruths and misconceptions out there. The reality is the industry that's dealing with sales and all of that around businesses. Now, this is a common stat, and I can quote and what have you, but I mean, 85% of smaller businesses never sell.
I know.
15%
Absolutely.
sell, And even a smaller percentage of that, I think it's about 30% of those, end up getting a price which is probably, in line with the real value or the intrinsic value of that business. Okay. So most players in the industry play into that sort of narrow end of the wedge, saying, okay, how do we extract as much value from these 5% that actually sell? We kind of flipped it around the other way and said, but what about the 85%? And I have to kind of, it was a conversation with another, I don't know if I can mention his name, but another guy who's quite well known, a guy called Mike Finger, who you might know, Mike, also Mike. And he kind of said to me, like, what about the 85%? And we kind of knew this intuitively. So, we wanted to say to the 85% of business owners who are out there grinding, building, all of those sorts of things, how do we talk to you in a language that you understand? How do we increase your chances of actually, extracting that value? And how do we keep it simple? At the end of the day, there's 3 ways to value a business. I spoke about that. The sum of your future cash flows adjusted for risk. We talk about multiples. All that a multiple is, it's more of a sense check. It says, what are other similar businesses selling for? And then the third one is like, well, what happens if your business is really bad? It's losing money. It's not doing whatever. Can you sell the equipment and pay off the debt, and is there anything left over? Every other single method of valuation, all other 50 methods, are really just derivatives of those 3. So
100%.
if you understand that, then you can start to have a sensible conversation with the business owner around actually, what is your business really worth? Understand the cash flows, and then understand how an objective buyer would look at that. So a thing like, those cash flows are repeatable. What happens if you as the business owner go away for 3 weeks? If you decide you want to go fly fishing in Patagonia, Mike, like what happens? That's the crux. It doesn't have to be more complicated, to be honest. So the only reason you don't want to go fly fishing in Patagonia for 3 weeks is because you want to leave some other fish in the sea for everyone else, right?
It's on the list. So like, just to jump in here, like, and I'm really interested in what Kyle thinks, because he's in the U.S. market, right? So Graham got a nice exposure to the so-called U.S. market, but Kyle's been here a little bit longer. I find that a lot of the valuations, and that's all I'm going to say, are designed to sell consulting, right? And by the way, like, I'm not saying that's immoral, but I think a lot of business owners don't understand that necessarily. Or I'm even more afraid, Kyle, that they're starting to think that that's what a valuation is, that it's a vehicle to sell, monthly retainers and consulting fees and do stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way to look at it is you've got to balance short-term gains with long-term sustainability. And if that's going to be your approach to the market, you're going to get burnt eventually, and then it's going to kill a market for everybody. What is more important is you need to ask people, and this is something I've realized moving to Texas, is a lot of people ask, how can I help you, rather than like, what can I get from you, which is usually hidden in the like, what do you do type of question. It's like, what can I get from you? Rank on the kind of scale. If you focus on the entrepreneur and figure out like how you can actually help them, inherently in that, you are able to build a sustainable consulting model. And what's also really important, and it's something that we're trying to do, is we're trying to develop the ecosystem. So we play in our lane, we do what we do well, and then if there's somebody that's very good at scaling businesses outside of that, maybe we can open our network up to that person if the entrepreneur so chooses, or they can go and get their own people. But and to do the quick rinse and repeat, hey, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. Here's my retainer. It's $10,000, $20,000, $50,000 a month. Mm-hmm. That can only go on for so long. And I think, it would be better off if everybody realized that.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah, probably not.
I agree with you 1,000,000%. It's why we're talking. But like, I think what we have to do is we have to create a oasis. We have to create these oasis, right? And like, I've come to understand that there's a whole bunch of people that are going to be attracted to the marketing, attracted to this stuff, and are going to be very disappointed. And that's why, number one,
until they get burned.
Oh yeah, no, it's like I'm not going to share the examples, but I've got clients that have been burned. I really do like the fact that a business owner can come straight to bizval and get an evaluation without having it being tied to a consultant. That's still true, right?
Absolutely. I mean, Mike, I want to just touch on that. I mean, that's a core of what we do. So a business owner, what's made that challenging is obviously finding us on the internet or whatever the case might be. I mean, that's a whole different discussion. But
I remember the first website.
Yeah, exactly. But that is a real challenge. But I think on that is, if you're going to work with us, you have to realize one truth, and it's a mantra of ours, is we say, we'll tell you as an entrepreneur what you need to hear, not necessarily what you want to hear. And that is a philosophical shift. On the other hand, and I'm going on a little bit of a tangent, we also do work with advisors and partners, and that's an important part of our distribution strategy. But it might sound a little bit stuck up or snobbish, is we probably say more to no, and say no to more people. It's not like, hey, you want to sign up and use and work with us, and we say yes. Actually, we've got quite a stringent vetting process to say, hey, if you want to be representing bizval, if you want to be using our platform, if you want to be using our tool, okay, we need to make sure that you are good for this oasis or ecosystem oasis. And I think that's something you're passionate about, Mike, as well, is, that referral is not just about, hey, here's a list of 10 people who do exit planning, or here's a list of 10 people who do growth advisory. I want to be able to say with certainty, listen, you can chat to Mike, you can chat to John, you can chat to Peter. Those three are all very good at what they do. They might be slightly different. Mike might be the saltwater fishing guru in the world. Peter might be better at fishing in cold rivers in Colorado, and somebody else might be better for chasing salmon in Alaska. But I know with confidence that all three of those will be able to serve you. And at the end of the day, the entrepreneur then needs to decide, who do they want to work with? Who have they got that resonance and that connection? To use an example that you used earlier, who's their personal connection that we share something around special needs children, or whatever the case might be? Yeah, I mean, hopefully that gives a bit of color to the question. As you can see, I like to use stories and analogies to kind of illustrate
100%.
that.
100%. Like it's really interesting because I am excited. This is the first time I've gotten to meet Kyle officially, other than the email. But I'm very excited that bizval was able to get to where you've got someone that's headquartered in the United States. And then as I've been building my network and my stuff like that, it's always interesting because so I work with Growth Drive, George Sandman, and so I use his Clarity software. I use it for good purposes, right? Because the business valuation for me within that software, even though George is pretty accurate, the business valuation for me is not we're not talking about selling the business, right? The other thing that I think is really important from a credibility standpoint, right? And so this is, as someone, I like the software, I enjoy it. Kyle and I'll be talking about bizval and other opportunities later. But I think it is what makes you guys so powerful for me and so credible, apart from the personal relationship with Graham, which is why we're here, but is the fact that you've removed all the barriers, because typically business owners got to go to there's some sketchy stuff out there, which I don't trust at all, or they're having to go through a financial advisor or another consultant. And I think there are some real advantages to strategic partners that work with you all to be able to go to that business owner and say, hey, look, like if you would like to work directly with and get a valuation that I don't own, that I'm not in charge of, they can share it with me, I'm sure. But if you'd like to do that, have something that's independent, have something that is perhaps slightly more credible, I think that is so powerful. And then I know that you guys have got different levels of valuation. I know that because of the really awesome, not awesome, but let's just say that it's a little bit less expensive to have highly seasoned and trained CPAs in Cape Town than in Austin. Am I right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I guess we're going to be careful when we talk about in terms of price arbitrage and tariffs and all those things. No, but jokes aside is
don't talk about tariffs.
Don't exactly. I'll be kicked off the podcast. But you know what I mean?
That's the third rail in
Jokes
the United
aside,
States.
Mike, these are universal principles. You know, whether you in London, Shanghai, Austin, or even Roanoke, you know, they're universal principles that apply. I think that's the first thing. I think also there's a lot of value to be had by understanding these sorts of things and how they work in other parts of the world. So something that the US is dealing with for the first time in a very long time is volatility, inflation, up and down, and whatever you know, in evaluation, using something like a multiple, which relies on things being the same as they were previously,
Exactly.
that's great. But in a let's call it a more dynamic world where things change from day to day, hey, you might need a different approach. So we can take those learnings.
Day to day. I would take day to day.
Exactly. It's a minute.
Stay off of X. No, it's so I'll give you a real world story, right? So one of my favorite cousins is a very successful entrepreneur, runs a business in which he builds alloys.
Yeah.
It's for special products for special companies. And I called him up after the recent volatility, and I was like, "Hey man, how you doing?" He's like, "It's insane. Like the tariffs right now are like he's gone from a incredibly valuable company to not so much. I mean, the cash flow is still there. People are paying the tariffs, but from your guys' perspective, you're in the weeds on this stuff. How are you helping these business owners deal with, number one, this chaos that affects something I just have so much. I'm thinking about that importer, right? Who's designed something, Kyle. They've come up with a concept and they managed to get it outsourced. They didn't do it from China. They did it from Malaysia or whatever. And they built this business, and now they're a year out and they want to sell their business. And all of a sudden, like, how are you guys helping these business owners right now?
I think one of the most important.
I'll ask Kyle to tackle the first part of that question, and he didn't mention it in his intro, but Kyle's got a background in global macros, which is actually surprisingly useful in this context. And then I'll tackle a couple of the sort of, let's call it, internal ways that we do that with clients. So Kyle, I don't know if you want to take a stab at the first one.
I mean, certainly the thing is, you know, you have to have your house in order to begin with. You know, and it goes for everything. If your fundamentals aren't there, if you build your house on mud, you know, it just takes one rainstorm and your house, you know, gets washed away. So kind of going back to basics is step one. Make sure that internally you're steadfast and rock solid. And then secondly, I think the other important thing is, you know, tying into valuations, you need to stress test your company, you know, depending on the phase, every 6 months, every year. You need to understand, like, you know, what can your company actually withstand? It's something, so my background is in global macros and risk primarily. And, you know, when we were looking at stock portfolios or looking at like geopolitical cyber risk adjustments, like on transactional risk, you build out buckets and look at different risk thresholds, you know, what happens to the company's value? How should you adjust that risk premium? So in an environment like we have right now, I think understanding your 6-month risk, your 1-year risk, and then your longer term risk is really important. Understanding that profile and how it affects your value. On top of that, I just want to say, and I mean, there's going to be short-term volatility for sure. I think the market is pricing in risk potentially even a little higher than it should be, just based on the uncertainty. But as the business owner, I think trying to understand, like, what can you do to plug the holes of your ship if you do feel like you're being affected is very important. And then on top of that, it's just longer term. You know, things tend to be, you know, it's like if you get a big fright about something, you know, in your personal life, right? It's the most scary at the point either leading up to it or as it happens. But as you get a little bit more distance, a little more used to it, you end up figuring things out. So I think it's important just to kind of like, you know, center yourselves a little bit and keep moving forward, doing what you do well, and then plugging any potential risks that come up. You have to be adaptable.
That's beautiful. I remember, I didn't tell him this, but during COVID in the United States, I had some very discreet conversations with friends of mine in international banking, and especially domestic, big commercial banking. And I said, did the vast majority of quote unquote non-essential businesses, did their value just drop from a lending perspective? And he's like, you're an asshole. And I'm like, he goes, that was a terrible question to ask me, and I'm not going to answer it. And I said, you just did. Thank you very much. And I think that luckily, to your point, Kyle, which is what I'm reinforcing, there was a moment in time where it was a really bad time to own a non-essential business in the United States because no one knew if gyms would ever be a viable investment ever again. No one knew all these different things. And we've recovered from it. I don't know if values are the same, but it doesn't matter. What I like about what you guys do is you present because it's not tied to a consulting agreement, you present a way that I believe smaller businesses can reasonably price in more frequent valuations that can give better data, I believe also for consultants as well. And Graham, you said there was some wonky stuff you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, so I want to just talk about, 5 things. The first one is Kyle
just want to
touched
talk
on it,
about
and he
5
always
things.
tells me,
5 things, Kyle.
my camera's got a wide angle. But the first one is we always talk about direction is more important than precision with a lot of these things. So, you do a valuation, and Kyle will correct me on this. I always use the British term. I say we have a tool to be able to do scenarios. Okay, so what if your business can grow at 20% per annum and not 5% per annum? So you do a valuation, then you can stress test that.
That's per year, by the way.
Bold.
For my listeners, that's per year.
Yeah, exactly. Not ever. So we do that with our valuation. Is you can say, well, what if I hired a 2IC to come in and run my business, or I hired a head of sales, or I spent extra on Google? What would that do to my business? And we do that because evaluation, and this is a fundamental truth, is forward-looking, not backward-looking. Valuation is a bit like saying, how much longer are you going to live from today? What you did in the past, your habits around smoking, drinking, exercise, and that obviously sets a baseline. But you can change that. And what if you do the following? So that's the first point in how we tackle that. The other is actually 4 points combined. Unit economics is key. Understanding how much money do you make from each widget that you sell or each service that you deliver. Absolutely key. And most business owners, actually either have an intuitive view of that or can get that quite quickly. The third is customer concentration. So how concentrated are your customers? Do you have one big contract with the US Defense Force that suddenly there's a new technology and your contract gets canceled?
Or a new administration.
Yeah.
Or new administration or whatever. So that's absolutely critical. Most business owners understand that. When you start out in business, everyone thinks, fantastic, I've just secured a contract with, Walmart or Amazon, and sometimes what happens is suddenly you end up taking all your customer concentration goes towards servicing that one big client.
Well, and you don't get paid for
because they're
months.
big.
And you don't get
exactly.
you don't get paid for 18 months, I think, is Walmart, or I think that's Walmart, you have to wait 18 months.
So you've got this one big client that impacts on your working capital cash flow, and your unit economics gets squeezed because they know that you're dependent on them. So these things all work together. And what we try to do is try to explain that in very simple. And I tell you, 99% of the time when we have a conversation with the business owner and ask them these kind of questions.
Hold on. So did everybody catch that? These are real people doing valuations that you can talk to.
Mm-hmm. You're spot on.
Wait.
I have to chuckle.
Hold on. Anybody listening to this that's had a CPA do a valuation, that had a certified valuation, did you actually, as the business owner, talk to that CPA about that report? And in most cases, you didn't.
And were they able to explain it to you in language that you can understand?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So that, I think, Kyle, can you highlight the fact that there's an actual human being doing this?
Yeah, I mean, certainly. We have, as you mentioned, we have different levels of valuations. Even on our free valuation calculator, we have a human checking every single data point that comes in. Accidentally you had a bit of a sticky finger and something looks a little off. We'll reach out if it's on, if it comes through our website and just double check that they actually meant to say what they said. Or if it's to a partner, you know, we'll send you an email and say like, hey, you should maybe follow up with this company. There could be something off on here. And that's really important to know because it sets expectations correctly. I mean, the last thing you want to do is, you know, you add an extra zero and then all of a sudden, you know, you're planning for your island or your yacht or something like that, and you get a bit of a reality check when it comes to sell a business. I mean, it's important to have an objective view of what's going on. Objective views of reality is something that is essential but missing most of the time.
Yeah, it's so crazy. So like, I'm going to make a pitch. So if you're a successful financial advisor, and let's just say you're less cynical than most, which means you're more cynical than almost anyone else. But let's say you're less cynical and you are looking at and thinking about this podcast, and I certainly hope you are because I love financial advisors. And you're saying to yourself, this is really interesting. I would love to know, really love to know for my business owner clients, what a really good assessment of the value of their businesses are. This is why this is powerful for you as a financial advisor. So in sales, we always track pipeline, right? What's the value? And in financial services, it's typically AUM or revenue. I like revenue better because if you only sell one thing, I got questions for you on, shall we say, product concentration, right? Mm-hmm. But there's another pipeline. And the pipeline, if you have business owner clients and or you want to start prospecting for them, you need to have a really good idea what the exit value in your pipeline is. And I really want to encourage you to get as accurate as you can with reasonable economics. And I don't know a better source than bizval, frankly, because say you invest a couple $1,000s per valuation at the high end. Say you invest, and I don't know what it is, so I think it's less than 10. So there you go. I think it's like, but say you went with their highest value product, all of a sudden you and your business owner client that you are managing their future and you are absolutely explicitly wanting that exit value to then come into you being able to manage retirement for that business owner or their next venture. Like the amount of precision and clarity that you get from a good valuation, not a crap one designed to sell more consulting. I just want you you guys are going to chime in a second, but that's where I see the value that you guys can bring is empowering these financial advisors to, number one, quantify that exit value pipeline, which allows them, and this is what most financial advisors don't do as well, it allows them to allocate resources to servicing those business owners, not just on current revenue, but realistic future revenue. How do I staff to support those business owners? Which consultants am I bringing in at what levels? What do you guys think about what I just shared there?
Mike, you're absolutely spot on. It's all about that. We say we want the advisor to be a rock star advisor to their clients. Okay. And what does that mean? It's not selling them a product that you get a commission on. I mean, obviously you need to make money as an advisor. I mean, I'm not disputing that.
They are.
But yeah, no, they are. But independence is absolutely key. So by using someone like us, we actually independent. I've got no vested interest whether you sell or not or whatever. So that concept of independence is absolutely key. I think the other thing is, there's value, but there's also sellability. So we also have some stuff that talks about investment readiness or exit readiness, okay, if you want to call it that. So that goes hand in hand with the valuation. The other thing is that it's not just sell the business when it comes to an advisor or financial advisor. There are things like, key man insurance, and Kyle might have to translate into, or buy, sell insurance. What happens if one of your business partners dies and now suddenly a spouse who knows nothing about the business is a 50% shareholder with you? I mean, I hate to talk about these.
You ready for what's worse? So I had some influence in the Growth Drive software on the Protect Value side, because when I do these assessments personally, I don't do valuations, right? That's something we'll talk about, right? That's not my expertise, but I'm a big time risk manager, always have been. And that's what my referral book's all about, risk management. Kyle, I know we're going to get along, right? Because think about applying what you know about risk management corporately to individual relationships, and you'll see it's a beautiful synergy. That's exactly how I look at it. Human beings are precious, and more precious than a company. But here's the thing. When you look at all of this stuff, how in the world do we make sure that we protect people?
And Mike, it's interesting. I'm a big Stephen Covey fan in terms of some of his principles. And, you can look at the Eisenhower matrix, or, this concept of urgent and important, right? And in the financial planning space or financial advisory space, a lot of these things are important, but they're not urgent until they are.
Well,
until something happens.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to visually show somebody something to be able to extract that emotive.
I'm going to throw you a
response.
bone. You ready? Do you guys assess for disability insurance?
We work with advisors.
No. In your
partners.
assessment, do you identify disability insurance gaps?
We don't actually, but it's a good question, and we probably should look at it.
So here's why. You ready? I was talking to one of my clients, closely held partnership 50-50, and I was I was doing what you and I were talking about 3 years ago. I'm just doing like a loose little napkin math thing. And I said, hey, do you guys have proper insurance? And Kyle, they're like, well, of course we got life insurance. I said, okay, well, what I'm telling you is if you're in a car accident today, you better die. Because your biggest insurance risk in a closely held partnership is disability. It's not death, it's disability. And he goes, what do you mean? And this is CPA, good friend of mine. I go, and I'm pointing to him, if he gets disabled in that car wreck and can't work for a year, what happens to your firm?
Yeah. So, you know what, Mike, I'm going to jump in here on a anecdotal story. So, small business that I worked for, there's no internal operating documents. It was essentially, the boss gets run over by a bus. It's game over, lights out. And I think for a lot of small business owners, I don't think it's been communicated well enough how critical having operating procedures really is. If you've got your your owner dependency risk sitting at a maximum, I mean, we have stats around this. I mean, your value is effectively vanquished. Yeah, I mean, you can have a fantastic company. You can have a valuation of, whatever it may be, 20 million, 50 million. But if the company can't run without the owner, you're buying a job. The person that buys it is going to have to redo all of this stuff, figure it all out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's insane. So like the way I sold, but they went out and bought permanent disability insurance the next day. They went out and applied for it and bought it. And I said, here's the deal. I said, do you have enough cash right now that if something happened to him and you had to buy him out, that you could pay him out of cash? And they said, no. I said, do you think the bank is going to loan you the money to buy him out when they do their due diligence and and they went, I said, gentlemen, we need to start thinking about due diligence while we own it, while we're running it. And I'll tell you, Kyle, that owner dependency is a really sticky wicket. It's very, very challenging from a consulting side because of ego and identity.
So, Mike, I'll tell you one of the things that is tricky with that as well is a lot of these owners, I shouldn't say a lot, I'll just say some owners, will say, oh, well, if we give away the keys to the kingdom and it's all kind of documented, what happens if our employees turn on me and then go and start their own company like this? I mean, to which, look, you got the wrong employees. You shouldn't have hired them in the first place.
Yeah, and you should be a better owner.
But without it, it's game over. And then you've got to look at your succession, look at your family. Like if they were depending on that as an income, now that income is completely gone. So it is, I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to have these processes documented and updated frequently. There has to be one version of the truth.
1,000,000%. And we're going to have to land the plane in just a minute because I've got a date to go on with a far better looking person. But like, just to your point, I think that when you don't have documented internal processes, that the probability of an employee stealing intellectual property or misappropriating it is actually higher. Because in essence, they're creating their own internal IP because you didn't do your job, which means that they feel like they own it. right?
Correct.
And so that's huge. So guys, we're gonna have to land this plane. This has been fabulous. I knew it was gonna happen, Graham. I knew there's no way we'd be done in a half an hour. So I reserve the right to bring you guys back for a follow-up episode at the end of it, because I think I'm gonna try and do a panel. And bring on some really quality people for an open-ended kind of Q&A. Most importantly, number one, Graham, thank you, my friend, as always. Kyle, it's wonderful to meet you. Can you guys let everyone know the best way to get a hold of either or both of you?
Okay, I'll go first. Easiest is to go to our website, www.bizvalglobal.com. Unlike what the CRM experts said to us, our mobile numbers are on the website, as are the email addresses. So you can find them over there. My number's there, Kyle's number's there. And we've done that intentionally because we never want to be a business that you can't get hold of the decision makers. As much as we have processes and have dealt with owner dependency and dealing with that, I think it's a trust thing. If the number's hidden and you can't get hold of the person, well, that's a problem. So yeah, go to our website, www.bizvalglobal.com, and you'll find our contact details there. Or you can find me on LinkedIn. Mike, I'm sure there'll be a link in the post. Kyle, I don't know if you want to add.
Yeah, nothing to add on that. But yeah, you can find us. We're not hiding, and yeah, look forward to hearing from people.
I'll just say, like, if you're nervous, all my stuff's available everywhere on the internet as well. If you want to talk to me about how great they are, I will be glad to tell you they're great, and then I'll introduce you. Fair enough? Fair enough.
Fantastic.
All right, gentlemen. Thank you guys so much. We will follow up again.
Appreciate it, Mike.
Fantastic, and enjoy the date night, Mike. I hope it's a good movie and good dinner.
It will. I will.